Great, so the title of my project is Editing is the most important and creative aspect of the storytelling process. It's the symbiosis of creativity and filmmaking. And what I mean by that is that when it comes to editing, it's the editor's job to piece together all the footage that's been shot for the film, to piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle almost, to make a story out of, make a narrative out of all the footage that they've got. And so some of the things we're going to be covering are the emergence of film editing as a method of storytelling in 1903, which started with the film The Life of an American Fireman made by Edwin Porter, and just how the practice is still used and the way it has evolved into how it is today. And also we're going to be talking about how editing is a key tool that's used in crafting a story, as without it, audience are only able to see a single scene, and you can't, like this, it's just something that they would be able to look at possibly with their own eyes in a scenario. And how editing gives the ability to see multiple different scenarios from various locations, which gives them multiple different things to link together. And there's a good quote I found from Mark Goldblatt, which says, taking one shot and another shot and giving it a third meaning. The third meaning is an effect and emotion that's greater than the sum total of the two parts that put it together in the first place. And this is the basis of all editing, which I think is a good quote, because it basically says how much of a tool it is, as without it you've just got footage, just various different pieces of footage that don't really mean anything unless they're put together. Cool, and some of the things I will be talking about are the origins of editing, so where it began and how it was made, the different ways a film can be edited, so just different examples of footage that might use different tactics, like interweaving different stories together, or non-linear editing, or that also links to the various editing techniques that are used within films, so like just things like jump cuts, slice cuts, and the decision-making process for a suitable editing style. So what is needed when, how editors will decide the way they want to go about making their film, like with fast editing, or like with pacing, tone, and all that thing, and then also the pros and cons of film editing. So I want to talk about like the good and bad aspects about it, because of course it's never going to be 100% perfect. There are other things that need to be considered, like sound and music. Okay, yeah, so I saw the origin of it because originally films were just made of a single shot of something that was filmed until either the creators lost interest or they ran out of film. And the problem with that was that audiences would soon lose interest, because there was no other. It was just say you had someone squirt someone else with a hose for like a comedic effect. Once the gimmick of seeing a moving image wore off, the audience didn't have much of a reason to be interested in it anymore. And Auguste Lumiere was pessimistic about the future of cinema and once described it as an invention without a future. And then it was Edwin Porter in 1903 came up with the idea of cutting together different shots to create a narrative, and this was first seen in the 1903 short film The Life of an American Fireman, which cut between the two scenarios of a burning building and the people trapped inside, and the firemen coming to save them. And what this did was it gave an audience two different scenes they could link together and get a sense of something they wanted to see happen and get engrossed within the story. And yeah, it was the first example of just editing being used as a storytelling tool. And I read through many different sources, and with books, web articles, and videos. And a good source was Bruce Bloch's book, The Visual Story. And in this, he says that there is rhythm in editing, and every time the editor makes a cut, a new rhythmic beat can be produced. And then he goes to discuss the different factors. There's editorial alternation, visual tonal contrast between shot and visual repetition, and so for example, with visual tonal contrast, you'll get, say you have one scene that will be very dark, and then it'll jump to another one that could be very bright, just to like show shifting locations. And then with visual repetition, it could be the use of two same shots cut together. Say, for example, you're having a like a personal conversation between two people, it just cut between the two different shots. And then there's editorial tempo, which is the speed in which the cuts are made. So this gives you the ability to, like, say, if you're having a chase scene, you'd expect much faster, rapid cuts, which allows you to add a sense of, so rhythmic editing allows you to tell stories not just through the different scenarios and locations, but also through tone and pace, because it gives you more control over that with the use of speed and the light. So yeah, it allows you to give like a sense or the atmosphere with films like Blade Runner, which use a slow building pace to like create a whole world and narrative, or Taken, which gives like a fast-paced adrenaline, shortage of time feel with its fast, frantic cuts and like adrenaline feel vibe. Cool. And there's also, I also needed to discuss the importance of other parts of post-production, with such as sound design and music, because I need to make the point that although I believe film editing to be the most important part, it's not the only part, and you do need sound and music to create a whole image as well. And I found a good quote by Ken Dansinger in his book, The Technique of Film and Video Editing, where he says sound should help and create and maintain a sense of realism throughout the film. The sound should support a particular dramatic core idea, just as the images should. And what Dansinger is saying is that you do need sound and music to create a full narrative. Like while visual help you get a story, and in some ways a tone, like the use of music and sound can also help you get like more atmosphere and emotion through like what sounds would connotate. So like the slow brooding music of say the Jaws theme as the shark approaches connotates a sense of impending danger and peril. And yeah, the book overall showed that visual editing, while still an important creative aspect of the film, it's not the only thing, and you do also need sound. And I thought that was useful to my production, as I did want to get a bit of both sides in it as well, not just talk about the visual editing. I watched the documentary The Cutting Edge, the Magic of Movie Editing, and director Rob Cohen said a really good quote, which is, editing is why people like movies, because in the end, wouldn't we like to edit our own lives? And I think this works because it shows a reason as to why audiences can get engaged with the film, because films would act as like almost a highlight reel, just made up of important and entertaining moments, which is the way they'd like to think that they could live themselves. And Quentin Tarantino also says in the documentary, for a writer it's a word, for a composer or a musician it's a note, and for an editor and a filmmaker it's the frame. I thought this worked well, because when it comes to, it kind of talks about frames almost more as the art form, because when it comes to music it's all about the length and the sound of the notes, and when it comes to filmmaking, it's also about how the frames are used and are they used correctly to create what you want. And this just shows the creative ability and power of using the right frames. And I thought that overall The Cutting Edge was a very good piece of research, as well, it also shows like the in-depth mindset of editors, and also just how much creative freedom that you get with editing. For example, when Quentin Tarantino and his editor Sonny Menk were editing together Pulp Fiction, and they were trying to discuss how long the scene when they get back after the day with John Travolta and when he gets back from the dinner date scene with Uma Thurman, as they were both trying to discuss how long the scene should be and like how long certain cuts should be, and it just showed like just how you can get a lot more room and a lot of freedom with editing together scenes. Oh yeah, so I also looked at the pros and cons of editing, and some of the pros were, as I've said previously, the ability to cut between multiple situations and locations does allow an audience to create a psychological and emotional link between more than one event, investing them in a story that you couldn't just get with either sound or music or just a single scene on its own. And also footage can be amended during the editing process if there's any small mistakes made with when filming, like if something goes on for too long or something that happens in the middle, you can either like cut it out or splice other shots in between to fix these small issues, because any even like small mistakes can make a huge difference in the overall quality of a finished product. And I also talked about some of the cons, which was that visual editing can't, in all cases, create a whole engrossing piece of film on its own. There is also sound design and music play a factor. So, for example, as I said, the theme in Jaws is used to connotate a growing sense of danger, and whilst the use of like the slow-moving waves does play an important factor, that music does also like get into your mind, and as it like builds up and gets faster, it shows a sense of danger coming closer and closer. And also how editing is a very time-consuming thing to have to do, and a lot of the time it has to be done after the filming has ended, as you need all the footage that you'd be able to do, and also it can't just naturally change on the fly. If the theme of a film changes halfway through, you have to like basically completely start again, and in some cases that's not really possible with the footage you have. Like an example would be for Suicide Squad, where they wanted to change the complete tone of the film after filming had finished, and then in the end it just resulted in a critically panned piece of film. Cool. And for my production piece that I was going to make, I wanted to try experimental filmmaking, and I saw I could quote sums up in the book Film: A Critical Introduction by Maria Promagiore. It states that experimental film, experimental cinema or avant-garde cinema is a mode of filmmaking that rigorously re-evaluates cinematic conventions and explores non-narrative forms and alternatives to traditional narratives or methods of working. So basically what it's saying is that it takes what people are used to. So like you have a story you often believe is told through the characters and what they say and the events that happen to them. Whereas with experimental filmmaking you can try and twist it around and tell a story through different ways. And this can often be done through the use of like images and sound. And so to do that, I wanted to create a video that starts with just like something like a simple premise, such as a dog walking through a park, then using sound and visuals to describe their internal thought process and emotions as they explore through the park. Because what I sort of thought about this was how a human being, when they're walking through the park, will often listen to music or something on their phone or read a book, whereas a dog is perfectly happy just walking around investigating. And I wanted to try and show that the mindset of what they'd be thinking and feeling at the time. And I took some inspiration from the visual aspect from the short film process from directors Dave Corbett and John Beavers, as I like their use of images and cutting to different places to show the emotion and what the guy was going through in his mind, and also the use of music to create an emotion from Peter and the Wolf, where music was used to create a visual image of an animal, and like different sounds would create either a more dangerous animal or a happier, more safe animal. And I thought that creating experimental film would be a good production for my project, as they can often be done on a low budget, and would also allow me to create a narrative that is done mostly through editing techniques rather than like focusing too much on like a script or characters, and could be done just shown thoroughly through the cutting of images and sound together. And it would also allow me to see all factors in their own merit and to judge the importance of each one. And finally, this is just a bibliography with various books, web articles and videos that I was been looking through for my for research.
Okay, you've mentioned sort of Peter and the Wolf and the embodiment of sound, as I would put it, and the characters that are shaped there. With your project, where are you going to move that forward? What are the directors have you got, apart from some of the ones that were in the documentary that was what editors do? So what other filmmakers have you been looking at to sort of inspire you?
Well, I've been looking through a lot of like short independent films, which I've found on Vimeo or YouTube. I haven't necessarily looked at like any directors themselves. I've just looked at each film. I'd like various different films individually.
Yeah, so with this idea of symbiosis, you're saying that sound is an intrinsic part of the filmmaking process, but that's not always been the case. What about with your final project, colour, as well? Because there is a symbiosis there.
Yeah, so colour is definitely a important. Yeah, so colour is definitely something I would want to use, as like it plays in a very large aspects of like, say you've got something that's very desaturated, you'd be thinking dull and slow, so I would be using it. I probably would use more bright broadening colours to show off a more happier vibe.
Right, so in terms of lookup tables and stuff like that, and log footage, would you just simply go to the black and whites, or would you have any particular purpose with the? Because is that drawing narrative?
Yeah, I'd say what I'd do is I'd use like colours in set positions, like to highlight things that say are of the most interest. So like I'm masking out like different things that bring it up just to kind of make various different objects stand out that kind of play more.
Yeah, so with this idea of the symbiosis of sound, visual, would you say that one is more important than the other in terms of visual, sound, colour? Because you're talking about the way the story is moved forward because of technological advances that you quite clearly articulate with the history of how this has evolved, and you cited the fireman and the probably first use of juxtaposition of shots.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do an experimental piece, what's going to come first?
I'd say still the it would be the visual aspect would come first, because I believe that is the most important part of telling a story, as you can move along with the characters within the film and kind of go at the same going along the same path that they do.
Okay, so you've referenced a couple of experimental films there, but I think you need to look at some other experimental films, obviously, because your research is just going to expand anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's the way you treat this and how that links directly back to this symbiosis that you're talking about, and with the experimental film, how that works to either develop narrative or try something new. What are the artists, you don't have to answer right now, could you actually cite that have actually moved that envelope out? Because you cited the fireman.
Yeah.
And that really did move, because you're going beyond, early cinema there in 1903, you need to explore more of the experimental aspect of video,
Yeah.
how that symbiosis works together to enhance either a narrative or not a narrative. So entirely up to you. But you know, I said, what for you is the most? It is the visual.
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah.
So potentially you could do a silent movie. No?
Yeah. I mean,
It's
there's.
a music video.
I'll say there is. I mean, yeah, you potentially could tell the story through a silent film, but I thought I just wanted to just kind of include some music and sound, just to see everything in its own merit, and kind of put it all against each other.
Okay, so you've got all this grammar of the edit and those kinds of things, and it shows the visual story there. And I think you need to dig a little bit deeper into some of those things. And there's a good one there, that's it, In the Blink of an Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
And I think you need to expand sort of beyond what you've got there, because these are all sort of academic texts about editing. What about what directors and producers say as well would be quite helpful for you when you're actually making something, because this is something that you're going to use in your show reel, and it's going to be something that can take you forward as an artist.
Yeah.
Gotcha.